Hello again, everyone. It's good to have you with us for this event. It figures to be an exceptional one that doesn't need any buildup.
Randy Moss, without even really being able to run as he shoots the moon to the fans here in Green Bay.
That is a disgusting act by Randy Moss.
I guess that's what I'm saying, Brooksy. You get that through your head?
I guess so.
Yeah.
It's kind of a waste of time.
Oh, then get the f*** out of here then.
Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40!
Playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs. You kidding me? Playoffs? I just hope we can win a game.
If I find out there's a tape about what I just said, I'm going to kick your f***ing ass and whoever's associated with it.
It's CNN. We're not going to use it.
Well, you got to tell people you got that f***ing microphone around.
Okay,
what the f*** you think? You think I'm happy about getting 15-yard penalty? You got to be out your mind.
Wait a minute, there's something forming here. Forming. It says, what a question.
That's why I don't read the newspaper.
I'm always confident I whoop all of them. You're being extremely truculent. Whatever truculent means, if that's good, I'm that.
Hi once again, everybody. I'm Ed Berliner. Welcome into another edition of The Man in the Arena, the Press Box. Let us begin. As Major League Baseball opens its 2021 season as we do this show live, the question is how many people should actually be in baseball stadiums as America recovers from COVID-19? It is a vexing question for ownership because, let's face it and get right down to the real nub of the issue here. Baseball wants to get back the money they lost in 2020. It's all about the money. I keep telling people over and over again, no matter what we talk about, it's follow the money. And that's what we're going to do here. Major League Baseball teams, for the most part, are making the right decision. They are letting fans in the ballparks in drips and drabs. 2,000 here, 4,000 here, 10,000 here, whatever you want to call it. But they're also taking precautions. They're roping off seats. They're making sure that people, at least they tell them to wear their masks, and they tell them to basically take precautions in the stadium. But then, of course, we all know, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, there's going to be a lot of people who will simply break the rules. Why? Because we're human and that's what we do. But it's part and parcel what sports is facing right now, and that's putting people back in the stands. Major League Baseball is taking precautions save for one franchise. Why is it that it just happens to be in Texas? The Texas Rangers decided weeks ago that they were going to open up their stadium full bore right from the beginning. 40,000 fans, bring them in. Of course, they say that we're going to have precautions, but again, this comes down to the fact that people are people. They're not going to pay attention to all the precautions and all the warnings that they get, and how many people are actually going to be in the stands when it comes to ushers and security guards who are going to stop somebody and say, you there with the mask under your nose, go ahead and put the mask up there. You there, go ahead and put your child's mask up. It's not going to happen. They'll try, but the possibility exists that this could be another super spreader event. Haven't we seen enough of these? And why would the Texas Rangers do this? Simply to be different? Simply to just go ahead and say, we're Texas, we're going to open the doors no matter what happens, and we're just going to be tougher and rougher than the rest? Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, snark, snark, say no more, that sort of thing as well. Whatever it is, it could indeed be dangerous. President Joe Biden, in an interview on ESPN, was asked about a number of issues, and this was top of the list. The fact that the Texas Rangers had not only thought about and are going to open up their games to full fans, but then again the National Football League walks into it. Here's what the president had to say.
Governor Greg Abbott lifted the mask mandate in his state, allowing businesses to operate at full capacity. So the Texas Rangers say there will not be any attendance restrictions in their stadium this season. That means it could be filled to capacity, Mr. President, 40,000 people with masks required except when actively eating and drinking. What are your thoughts on the Rangers' decision?
Well, that's a decision they made. I think it's a mistake. They should listen to Dr. Fauci and the scientists and the experts. But I think it's not responsible.
So it's also not just baseball, it's in football as well. As you know, Commissioner Goodell said Tuesday the league is making plans to open its stadiums to full capacity for the upcoming season. Is it different maybe with them because the preseason is 4 months from now versus the Major League Baseball season beginning now? What's your reaction to Commissioner Goodell's decision right now?
Well, the longer time we have to get more people vaccinated, We're now at the point where we have almost 75, we'll have 75% of the people over the age of 65, the most vulnerable population, vaccinated. And we're moving across the board that way. We're significantly increasing the number of people vaccinated. And that's going to diminish the prospects of its spread. And so, but I think it's just in terms of being responsible. You see what's happening in Europe now when they lifted the mandates. They're going back. I don't know why we just don't follow the science and beat this. Just flat out beat it. We're going to have enough vaccinations, vaccinators. I've gotten thousands more vaccinators, people to do the vaccinations. We've opened up places, particularly for, there's some communities that are really hesitant because of past history. The black community knows that as recently as the end of World War II, there was experimentation on, African Americans. That's not happening now, but I understand the hesitancy. And we're doing everything we can to make it clear to people, get the vaccine as quickly as you can get it. Get in line. And by the end of this month, we're going to be in a position where everyone, in fact, is going to be able to get the vaccine, no matter what your age. There's not going to be only people over 65, et cetera. I think we should move in that direction.
Let's be certain we add something here. It's not like the Texas Rangers are some cavalier organization. The governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, is the one who said go ahead and open up to full capacity. So they are simply just following what they are being given by the government. But at the same time, President Biden is correct when he talks about two words in here. One is the S word, which is science. The other is the R word, that is responsible, as in responsibility. Are the Texas Rangers following the science, and are they being responsible? Of course not. They're not following the science at all, because the science tells us that you still have to back off and you still have to wait because we are not fully vaccinated yet and things could still get out of control. Are they being responsible? Again, absolutely not, because what could they do? Open up to 5,000 fans? Why not? Is it going to cost them money? That's the big deal again. It's going to cost them more money. They need to put the butts in the seats and recover what happened in 2020. Now, the National Football League is something entirely different. The NFL is saying that we are planning on having full capacity stadiums by later this season. Planning is different than actually having it in effect right now, because we still have several months. And Joe Biden is right when he says that we're going to have a lot of vaccinations. There will be more vaccinators. There will be more people who will be vaccinated, and America will have a chance to climb out of this dark hole. The National Football League also wants to make sure that they make their money back. They have an opportunity to be more responsible because they have time to do that. And of course, when it comes to their games, it comes later in the year, and they have an opportunity to be responsible. That's what it really comes down to at this point. Because as a fan, you have to ask yourself, if you're going to the games, if you went to Major League Baseball Opening Day 2021, were you responsible? Were the people around you responsible? I'm going to guess that maybe and probably not, because that's the way I see a lot of fans right now. But at least follow the science and be responsible are the smart things to do and say. Because otherwise we're going to be stuck in this cyclical motion over and over again, where there's going to be more cases. People will be sick. Look, I'm looking at the numbers right now. 30 million cases in America. 30,461,000 cases. And let's not forget, 500,000 deaths. It's not like it all just happened by magic. It happened because there was a virus that affected America, and we need to be responsible and follow the science. The question is, will the people and organizations around us? Let's move on. Joe Biden is also talking about socially conscious athletes. In Georgia, a law has been passed that has been excoriated by so many people across the country as one that will knock down voting rights for so many people in the state. And as we speak, there are organizations right now that are deciding whether or not they want to do business in the state of Georgia. I can tell you that as a member of the Screen Actors Guild, there are a number of productions right now that are in the process of shutting down. They're not going to do business in Georgia, which is going to hurt not just the state of Georgia, but it's going to hurt thousands of people who depend on film production, television production for their jobs. And then, of course, we have things like all-star games, which can go pretty much anywhere you want. And it comes down to the issue of socially conscious athletes. Because when Colin Kaepernick decided to kneel, and that created a furor, a spitstorm in America, people were deciding whether or not they fell on the side of yes, it was the right thing to do, no, it was not. But the issue here that is larger than any of one specific instance is that athletes are very often the part of social activism. They are the ones that create things and create moments that change America and change the world. Need we go back to the 1968 Olympics? Talk about Carlos and Smith and what they did on the winner's podium? That in itself shook the world, and to this day still has created a moment where people look back and say, those were athletes that changed the world. So now, even President Biden is noting, along with so many other people, that once again we have an instance where athletes could be at the forefront of changing America.
Tony Clark is the executive director of the Major League Baseball Players Association. He said he would, quote, look forward to discussing moving the All-Star Game out of Atlanta because Georgia Governor Brian Kemp signed into law a bill passed by the Republican-led state legislature to overhaul how its state elections are run. So, Mr. President, what do you think about the possibility that baseball decides to move their All-Star Game out of Atlanta because of this political issue?
I think today's professional athletes are acting incredibly responsibly. I would strongly support them doing that. People look to them. They're leaders. Look at what's happened with the NBA as well. Look at what's happened across the board. The very people who are victimized the most are the people who are the leaders in these various sports. And it's just not right. This is Jim Crow on steroids, what they're doing in Georgia and 40 other states. What it's all about. Imagine passing a law saying you cannot provide water or food for someone standing in a line to vote. Can't do that? Come on. Or you're going to close a polling place at 5 o'clock when working people just get off? This is all about keeping working folks and ordinary folks that I grew up with from being able to vote.
Let's try and stay out of the politics here for a moment and simply just discuss the issue here of athletes. I have covered these stories many times in my career, and I have been so enamored with these athletes who are willing to stand up and put their careers on the line. And there's been many cases where they've been blackballed. Look, I mentioned Colin Kaepernick. He indeed was blackballed by the National Football League and many of the owners because he decided to kneel for the national anthem. They decided to end his career, and that's why his career was over. It wasn't because he wasn't a good quarterback. He was a better quarterback than a lot of guys who got jobs. No, he didn't get a job because he was socially conscious. Let's remember things like Smith and Carlos in the '68 Olympics. Let's remember people like LeBron James, who stands up for what he believes is right. Let's take people like the U.S. women's soccer team, who sees an injustice and decides they have to speak up. Many times these athletes are indeed putting their careers on the line and they may never play again. Now, to be fair, a lot of them take these actions when they are near their retirement age, but many of them still, when they are in their prime, they do this. America changes because people stand up for what they believe is right. Do you believe it's right? You may not. Indeed, what's happening in Georgia right now, as you're watching this, you may say, Ed, you're all wrong. There's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. It needs to be done. It's all about IDs. You may say that. There are others who will look at this video and they will say, Ed, you're exactly right. It is what they're saying. It is a continuation of Jim Crow laws. What it's doing is suppressing the vote. Frankly, I have to tell you that here's my own political statement on this. Isn't America a place where everybody's supposed to be able to vote? Everybody? Every single time? That would seem to be the issue here. But again, it's coming down to politics, Republicans, Democrats, left, right, whatever. Stop. In this issue, let's just deal in athletes. Athletes are the ones whom people watch. They admire. They call them role models, even though many athletes don't want to be role models, and I don't think they should be in many cases. But the athletes have a pulpit. They have the ability. They have the microphone. They are the ones that people watch. They are the Twitter accounts with tens of millions of followers. They have an opportunity to say something. Hey, so do entertainers who don't do nearly enough of this. But the athletes, the ones that I'm talking about, the ones that I've covered over my career, they spend the time to stand out and stand up. This is a time to stand up. Bravo to Tony Clark and the Major League Baseball Players Association. That All-Star game needs to go. There are many other events that need to go. They need to be taken out of Georgia immediately, and then not only in Georgia, but in other states as well. There needs to be a rank fairness across the board. Not being able to give somebody a drink of water because they're standing in line to vote? Are you serious? This has got to stop somewhere. So I applaud the athletes for doing something about it and hope more of them speak up. Maybe we should listen to athletes because there's people out there who think they're nothing more than dumb jocks. Guess what? A lot of times they're smarter than you. They're even smarter than me. They're smarter than a lot of people because they see things going on around them and they're willing to speak up. Those are the ones that we should pay attention to. Let's move on. The NCAA is one of the greatest scam organizations in the history of world sports. Next to the International Olympic Committee and FIFA, the NCAA has been conning people and stealing money for years. How do they do it? They use athletes. They use them and don't pay them. This has been going on now for generations. And don't give me this argument, too, that athletes, the student athletes, are getting educations. Stop. Because at the same time these athletes are getting the education, what's happening? The books, the teachers, the rooms, everything is already there. It's servicing thousands of other students, so it's not as if they automatically just made these places for the athletes themselves. And a lot of these athletes are allowed to skate, and they have been for decades, on a lot of their academic issues. Because why? They're out there making money for the schools. They're out there sinking baskets, throwing touchdowns, scoring goals, doing all these things that put the cash into the coffers of the universities. And not just the universities, but the NCAA as well. The NCAA has been getting away with rank crimes in so many ways by using these athletes as nothing more than cattle fodder and throwing them away. But now the athletes are standing up and they're taking their case to the Supreme Court. Now the Supreme Court has issued a ruling, an opinion on what they think is going to happen. I got to make sure that I get this right because, remember, I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on TV. So the Supreme Court took this case under advisement and decided that they would look at it, the NCAA versus the athletes. And the NCAA was waiting to see what happened. The Supreme Court came out with a decision that is, in so many ways, vexing, if you will, which we will discuss. This, the report on the Supreme Court and the NCAA from NBC News.
Well, just as March Madness reaches the Final Four, the Supreme Court is weighing a very important case involving NCAA athletes. NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams joins us now with more on this. Pete, tell us about this case and what's at stake here.
Well, the case is about a limitation that NCAA wanted to put on what are known as education-related benefits, things like computers, musical instruments, postgraduate scholarships, or paid internships. A federal court, two lower federal courts, said those limits were excessive and the NCAA should not have put those limits on, and the court set its own limits. Today, the NCAA told the Supreme Court that what's at stake in this case is the future of amateurism, which is what makes college athletics different, and that if the courts come in more and more to decide whether the NCAA can set these rules, that it threatens what makes college sports different and competitive with professional sports. That's the argument. Of course, the case is not itself about whether student athletes can be paid. But if the Supreme Court were to rule against the NCAA in this case and say the court should have more of a role, then that could open the door to paying student athletes. The court seemed today to be of two minds on this. On the one hand, to think that NCAA is too restrictive, but at the same time worrying that allowing the courts more of a voice could jeopardize that very amateurism in athletics. For example, I'll give you a couple of quotes here. Brett Kavanaugh said the NCAA's authorities to set limits on benefits, quote, should not be a cover for the exploitation of student athletes. And Clarence Thomas, who's a big football fan, said, you know, we talk about limiting the benefits for student athletes when college coaches get paid millions and millions of dollars. But on the other hand, Justice Sonia Sotomayor, one of the court's liberals, said, I worry I worry that we could be undermining, destroying the game as it exists now. The Chief Justice John Roberts said he thinks that these court things could be like that game called Jenga, where you build a tower and then you try to pull out the individual logs. He said you do that time after time with individual court decisions, and the whole thing could collapse. So bottom line here, I don't think the NCAA's authority is going to be vastly cut back. Maybe they'll say that the NCAA went a little too far with these limits, but this didn't seem like what is going to be a huge turning point for the future of college athletics.
So, Pete, any sense of what this could mean for sort of long-term for college athletics down the road as they're looking at similar issues?
Well, what the NCAA is worried about here is continually having to go to court to justify every rule that it lays out, and then if it ever changes its mind, getting sued for not having that rule in place in the past. So that's what they're worried about. And I'm frankly not sure exactly how the Supreme Court's going to resolve that. It didn't seem like the Supreme Court justices are ready to say, okay, NCAA, stand back. Let's start paying student athletes.
Oh, the NCAA is just so concerned right now. They're wringing their hands because finally the highest court in the land is just inching a little bit forward on the NCAA to actually make them pay for what is nothing more than the con job that they have been instituting for decades. A couple of things on this. When they talk about the NCAA being too restrictive, yes, indeed they are, because there's already court action where the players themselves are looking to make sure that they are able to profit from their likeness. There's no doubt, if the NCAA uses an individual in advertising, that athlete, male, female, whatever, should be able to make a buck off their likeness, because that likeness is being used to help the school, the NCAA, the conferences especially. Let's not forget them. They're all in there to make a buck. So it's the athletes that are helping them make a dollar. They deserve to make a buck. Amateurism in athletics has been dead for decades. There is no such thing anymore. They want to say amateurism in athletics because that will give the NCAA an out, if you will, to be able to say, well, they're amateurs, we can't pay them. No, they're not. All they are is basically lower-ranking professionals because they still receive monies, they still receive stipends, and as a matter of fact, they should be receiving a whole lot more because for what these players are asked to do, they should be getting a lot more when it comes to being able to live, being able to eat, being able to transport, being able to have some fun, for crying out loud. But they won't do it because the NCAA uses this outdated, outmoded, propagandish idea of amateurism to help keep them afloat. Brett Kavanaugh, Supreme Court Justice, got it right when he said this could be a cover. That's all this is. This is a cover by the NCAA to make sure that they can go ahead and keep that amateurism sitting in there. Sonia Sotomayor got this incredibly wrong. And oh yeah, by the way, Sonia, I'm so sure that you know a lot about athletics. Maybe learn a little bit about what goes on at the NCAA before you spit out something so ridiculous when she talks about it could undermine the game. Look, the undermining of the game has already been happening. It's already there. If you're talking about the undermining of the game in a profitable sense, sure, guess what? The NCAA is not going to be able to make billions of dollars, and maybe people who are out there getting paid $10 million are going to have to be paid $2 million because they're finally going to have to pay the athletes what they're worth. The coaches, meantime, are making $4, $5, $6, $7, $8, $9, $10 million or more. The athletes deserve to make more. This is not a groundbreaking case yet, but it is just another step. Athletes deserve to be paid. They deserve to be paid for their efforts, for their likeness, for the money they bring into the conferences, the schools, and the NCAA. The time is long past to stop using them as little more than chattel, to basically throw them out there and say, go ahead and make us a buck and we're not going to give you anything. And again, I don't want to hear this argument about they get an education. Yes, they do get an education. Many of them do. But many of them don't. They come in and job the system where they come in and play basketball for a season, they're out of there. Guess what? The athlete who comes in and plays basketball for a season, all he or she is doing is readying themselves for the pros, and the colleges are giving them the chance to do it. Here, come on in, play for us, and make us money. If you make us that money, we don't care where you go. It's like anything else. Look, if you're an engineering student and you want to go in and study 4 years of engineering and you decide after 2 years that you have everything you need, you're working on a scholarship, all right? And you've got everything you need. You've got a job sitting out there that's going to pay you $500,000 to be an engineer. What do? You don't get your diploma. You leave. You take it. You walk out. Maybe you'll come back and finish your diploma later. But you're able to get the job because guess what? The school used you. They used you as a promotion. All you did was come in, you used them, and everybody is making their bucks off it. Stop. It's ridiculous. It's nonsense. It's time to call the NCAA what it is. It is a profit-making corporation that uses employees and individuals to make them a dollar. Good for the athletes. And the Supreme Court needs to really get its act together. Learn what it's all about. Don't just sit there and try to say, oh, we're going to cover things up here. No, you stop covering it up and make the NCAA pay and start paying the athletes what they deserve. March Madness? Have you seen the profits? I don't think we have to go any further. Let's go ahead and move on. The case of DeShaun Watson continues to rankle across the National Football League, Texas, and everywhere else. It is the darling at this moment of talk shows, social media, because it involves the things that everybody wants to talk about. It involves a high-priced athlete, multimillionaire athlete, the National Football League, professional sports, sex, sexual encounters, alleged sexual encounters, and all sorts of dirty little things that people get involved in and they can talk about. It's the perfect talk show fodder. And that is part of the problem here. Because what we have now are people who are not attorneys. They just play them on TV and radio. So what are they doing? They're out there spitting out accounts and talking about legalese, and they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. Why? Because it makes for good conversation. I have to tell you something. I have a tremendous, tremendous amount of respect for Rich Eisen. I think he is possibly the best individual on talk television and talk radio today. He is erudite. He asks the right questions. He is not... He's not insane when it comes down to a lot of the entertainment that he throws in there. I like the guy's show. At the same time, I've got to throw it out here about Mike Florio. Now, Mike Florio is a guy who talks about the National Football League. He's not a lawyer, never has been, has never studied law. All he talks about is the NFL, and he deals in rumors and innuendo and opinions. That's all he does. Courtesy of the Peacock Network, where the Rich Eisen Show is heard, this is Eisen and DeFlorio talking about the DeShaun Watson case. Now remember, there's a tremendous amount of legalese that's involved in here right now. We're not attorneys. I'm not an attorney. You might be one. But what we have here are people who have absolutely no right whatsoever to start throwing around ideas, thoughts, considerations, and innuendo legally when, quite frankly, they have no idea what they're talking about.
Jenny Vrentis' article in Sports Illustrated speaking to a massage therapist under a pseudonym from Houston talking about DeShaun Watson and his behavior in her massage room, and Watson's and the fact that she isn't part of this this Tony Busby group of accusers. For the first time, really made me pause, and it was very. And I'm not saying that I don't believe others accusers, and that's obviously the razor's edge of this conversation here. But it really was bizarre, and you can't sit here and say she's looking for money. You can't sit here and say that she's making it up with a lawyer who started this whole thing on his Instagram account. What do you think about all of this?
Well, I agree with you completely. The fact that this is somebody who actually rejected the overtures of Busby's firm and decided not to be represented by Busby and is evaluating her rights with another lawyer in Houston. And frankly, when you look at everything she said, there isn't that bright line, obvious grounds for liability that some of the lawsuits that have been filed, most of the lawsuits that have been filed, if the allegations in the lawsuits are proven, there is liability on the part of DeShaun Watson. So it does give credibility just to the broader picture that's been painted by 19 lawsuits and now a 20th person who hasn't sued and may not sue. You know, Rich, if it's just 2 or 3 people and you can show that one of them, as Watson's camp apparently believes, was trying to extort, that there was consensual conduct, whatever the case may be, if there's just 2 or 3 and you can blow a giant hole in one of the claims, that's one thing. You get up to 19 or 20, okay, one of the claims may have a flaw. You can't account for the rest. And I think that's the problem DeShaun Watson faces at this point, Rich. And the sooner, and I don't want anybody to misunderstand me when I say this, because I think he needs to have a reckoning. He needs to make this right. He needs to make it right with all the individuals involved. I have been arguing for a week now there needs to be a mediation session where everyone comes together. You get a retired judge who's got the gravitas to make everyone feel like they're getting a day in court, and work directly with every plaintiff and DeShaun Watson to bring satisfaction, closure, a sense of justice without a 2-year process. That's the best outcome for DeShaun Watson. I just don't know that he can manage that, because at the core of it all for the plaintiffs is Tony Buzbee, and no matter how much he says it's not about money, it is about money. And the problem now is, as Watson's waking up, Rich, to the reality that it's in his interest to resolve these cases now, from the perspective of a skilled and experienced lawyer who is in it for money, there's a premium if you want to do it now. And I think that's the challenge, trying to come up with a way to get all these people in the same room, get this resolved, and remove from it the Buzbee factor, where he's going to recognize, I've got this guy on the ropes, so the price of every settlement goes way up.
Well, we'd like to thank you, Mr. Attorney Florio. Marvelous, wonderful, just amazing accusations and just a wonderful amount of expertise that you've led to this. You are, of course, a lawyer, right? You do understand a lot of this. And as a matter of fact, when Mike Florio talks about he needs to have a reckoning, in whose opinion, Mike? Yours? How many courtrooms have you been in? How many mediations have you been in? And that's another thing where you talk about a mediation session. I'm sure, Mike, that you have been in dozens of mediations and you know exactly what you're talking about. I'm sure you know all about the judges, all about what happens, how it's run, when it's run. You know everything. Why? Because you've thrown it out there as an opinion that has absolutely no basis in fact behind it whatsoever, because, quite frankly, you're talking out your ass. That's what we need to discuss here. Because it is time for people who don't have any legal training to stop with the nonsense here. I said weeks ago, I don't know if DeShaun Watson is guilty, innocent. I don't know anything about the case. All I'm going to do is, as an individual who has covered cases like this before, and I've covered real hard murder cases before in my career, I'm going to sit back and say, you know, I'm going to listen to the evidence, and I can't draw a conclusion, because that's not my job. As a reporter, it's not my job to do that. I listen and then take it all in. And not only that, but part of what's going on here is I am not an attorney. So I don't make these accusations and all these assertions based on law, because I don't know. Look at that. The 3 words that we need to say, I don't know. No, the problem with this is this makes for marvelous babble is all it is. Let's talk about babble here for a moment. On the network FS1, you got to hear this one, because there's a show that features Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharpe. Shannon Sharpe, of course, the former National Football League player, Hall of Famer. Shannon is known for outrageous statements. This is an exchange, and it's mostly Shannon, because in listening to this, you have to remember again, Shannon Sharpe is not an attorney. He's just throwing this out. Why? Because he wants to create media. He wants to create Twitter reactions. He wants to get on Facebook. He wants this featured on YouTube. He wants you to know that Shannon's in there talking about this. This might be the most egregiously, terribly funny, hysterically bad thing I have heard in years.
All this is going to get pulled into the public light, and it's going to be fascinating to see how this impacts the larger world around it, to me, because lots of new questions are going to get asked.
It's just hard for me to believe that a woman that's been a massage therapist for any length of time and massaged a man has not accidentally touched a private part. It's just hard for me to believe, Skip. It's just hard. When you're massaging a special athlete and you're massaging his groin and you're massaging his adductors and his inner working, it's just hard to say you don't accidentally. It's just like a butcher. How does a butcher work 25, 30 years and never cut himself? How does a snake handler handle snakes for 20, 30 years and never get bitten? It's hard for me to see a scenario in which you do this, male or female, and you haven't accidentally touched someone.
Okay.
Okay.
There's also a line that cannot be crossed.
Yes.
Of aggressive behavior.
Skip, I'm not saying you up there groping them and things of that nature, Skip. I'm saying you doing a professional massage, what you went to school for to do.
Yeah.
It's just, for me, I don't want people, because, look, I think people are going to start to look like, well, okay, well, it's this many women, and maybe he has sex with them, and maybe he has a problem, and he's promiscuous. Being promiscuous is not a crime. Being promiscuous does not mean he committed a crime. It doesn't mean he's guilty of what they're alleging he is. All I'm saying is you and I think we're on the same page when it comes to this. This is this situation here. And what I'm thinking is that this is plaintiff number 3. And there might be some communication between DeShaun and plaintiff number 3 in which she admits that it was consensual. But if you want me to keep it hush-hush for perpetuity, this is what it's going to cost you.
Okay, and that's one.
Right, that's one. Hell, it ain't just one.
Oh, Shannon, shut up. Please. God, stop yourself. Before it gets any worse, please, God, shut up. We can't take away the stupidity that you've just dropped in here. Look, I try my best not to use the word stupid. I really do. And I've been called on it before by the people in my family who've said, Ed, you need to stop using the word. And it really is. It's a bad word. It's an insulting word. My granny is the one who used to tell me, you never call anybody stupid. It's an insult. However, I know that if my granny was alive today and if she heard that, the woman would be shaking her head right now going, my God, her head would explode going, the stupidity that throws from that is just astounding. You can't even say ignorance, because here you have Shannon Sharpe. Again, he's not a lawyer. He just plays one on TV. Here's one talking about it's like a butcher when someone, when a masseuse touches someone. How do you be like a butcher and not get cut? How do you be like a snake handler? I mean, it's just too funny. But in essence, it is serious, because what we have are people like Florio and Shannon Sharpe who are out there throwing out opinions that people are believing, that people will go for. They're falling for them. They're the ones who think, oh, he's got to be right. How could it not be like a butcher, like a snake handler? How could you not get it? And oh yeah, by the way, Shannon, here's just a quick idea, okay? You're a grown man now. If you want, you can use the word penis. It's okay, because it is a medical designation, so it's okay if you want to use it. But it still comes down to the fact that we don't know what happened. He doesn't know what happened. He is throwing it out there for comedy purposes, for no other reason than that. It's ignorant, it's destructive, it's foolish, it's knuckleheaded, it's brain dead. How many times do you want to say that out loud? And to make the point that I'm talking about, that people become engaged in this, and people listen to this sort of argument and these sorts of discussions, and they are not lawyers either, yet they become immediate experts on what's happening because they've heard it all. All I had to do was search out on YouTube and find one individual and one video and make sure that I present it here, because I am calling this guy the great American male fan.
If you're having a bad day today, think that your world is just falling down around you, maybe you can't stand your job, maybe you're not getting along with your boss, maybe you found out your girl is cheating on you with the janitor at McDonald's. I don't know, whatever is happening in your life that is making it piss poor, if you think you have it bad, just know that you don't have the problems that DeShaun Watson has. We talked about this story Thursday or Friday of last week, and at that time, I think there were maybe 6 lawsuits or allegations, maybe 9. I can't remember the exact number. It damn sure wasn't anywhere near the number of accusers that have come out since last week. 24 women. 24. That is a staggering number. There's a good chance that by the time I get this video posted on Wednesday morning, that number could be even higher. I mean, the accusations against DeShaun Watson are literally coming out that fast. Now, on one hand, I'm still taking all of this with a grain of salt. I'm still a bit skeptical. DeShaun Watson's been in the public eye for years, and in all that time, there's never been a hint of negativity attached to him. His reputation's been spotless. He deserves the assumption of innocence. We have a tendency in this country to jump to conclusions. Someone accuses someone of something, a lot of people automatically assume the worst, assume that the accuser is telling the truth, and the person being accused is automatically guilty. It's not supposed to work that way. It's actually supposed to be the opposite. In the court system, you are presumed innocent until proven guilty. Unfortunately for DeShaun Watson, in the court of public opinion, you're presumed guilty automatically, and even if you are proven innocent later on, your reputation will never be the same. It's still ruined. Now, with that being said, at this point, there are so many women coming out against DeShaun Watson, so many similar accusations coming out against him. It is getting more and more difficult to believe that there's not at least a little bit of something here. I always say on here, where there's smoke, there's fire. This is a lot of smoke around DeShaun Watson. Hell, there may already even be a fire. One of his accusers has went so far as to call him a serial predator, which if all of these accusations end up being true, it would be hard to argue against that point. Now, this particular woman's story is eerily similar to all of the other women. She's a massage therapist. She arrived at a location that DeShaun Watson gave her out in California. Now, supposedly, he locked the door when she came in, and then he forced her hands on his junk. That's what she's saying. Then, allegedly, he told her that he wasn't going to make her sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, but told this woman to never talk about whatever happened between them to anyone else. I don't know what to believe here. A lot of these accusations and stories are very, very similar to one another. They almost come across as they're being coached. I mean, I just find it real hard to believe that DeShaun Watson did the exact same thing 24 times. I mean, each accusation is almost a mirror image to the other one. It's just real hard to believe that he did the exact same thing 24 times. I'm not saying that it didn't happen. I'm just saying it's hard to believe.
The great American male sports fan. And there you have it. Because as people like Shannon Sharpe and Mike Florio throw out all this nonsense that has absolutely no basis whatsoever in the law, you've got people like that who are taking to YouTube and so many different sports talk stations, and what are they doing? They're basically just regurgitating the same incredible nonsense that has absolutely no proof behind it whatsoever. Here you go. There's a problem with DeShaun Watson. The problems that DeShaun Watson's going through, you know this. Why? Because he's a multi-million-dollar player who's got a legal issue right now? Okay, let's go ahead and forget that one here for a minute. Because when you talk about, and again, this is the point where Skizix there talks about, we jump to conclusions, where he bemoans that fact. Well, guess what? That's exactly what he did then later in this video, this marvelous presentation. By the way, I'm still absolutely just... I can't take my eyes off the drapes. Those drapes are just, they just grab you and they hold your eyes because they're just mesmerizing, if you will. But here we go. He says, jumps to conclusions where he then starts blaming the women, where he says, there's a little bit of something here. That's a conclusion. That's jumping to a conclusion. You don't know that there's anything here. You don't know there's one instance of anything there. Yet you are immediately jumping to the conclusions. And then Skizix here talks about the fact that it looks like or sounds like these women are being coached. Conclusion, opinion, guess, nothing more. That's all it is. It's just an absolute thrown out there guess. Whew. Let's just put this to bed, okay? Shannon Sharpe, shut up. The things you're saying are absolutely, incredibly nonsensical. You're a smarter man than this. I mean, at least I hope you are. You don't need to be doing this, and just doing this to go ahead and grab ratings on FS1 is not going to help any, because what you're doing is you're helping people like this poor fan out there who has no way of thinking for himself, suddenly becoming someone who just parrots exactly what you're saying. The same thing goes for Mike Florio. Come on, Mike, be smarter than all this. Let's back off on all this. We don't know what happened. We don't know what happened with DeShaun Watson, with the women who were involved. We don't know if anything happened at all. We don't know who's innocent, who's guilty. We know absolutely zero. Why? Because all we have are attorneys making assertions and charges. We don't have anything from the authorities, nothing from the attorneys, nothing from the police departments, zero. So why don't we just stop and let's go from there? Because if DeShaun Watson is guilty, find him guilty of a crime, put him in jail if you want, have him pay up whatever you want at this point. But the important thing is, let the system play out as it properly is supposed to do. And oh yeah, you don't have to listen to me either. Because like I said, all I am is an opinionator. But I'm throwing out the opinion that I don't know what the hell happened. And I'm going to wait to find out what happened. Because that's the proper thing to do, instead of just going off on a lark and trying to tell people that you know everything that happens in law, when quite frankly, what you know about the law would fit right next to a container of bovine excrement. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. We'll do this all again. Don't forget, you can catch the Man in the Arena newsroom and the Man in the Arena, the press box, social media, and at welcometothearena.com. For everybody here, I'm Ed Berliner. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Rock on, true believers. See ya! Be a part of the Man in the Arena. Join us on social media at Berliner Speaks on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And don't forget, all live shows debut on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. As for those live shows on YouTube, you can find those at edberlinerlive.com. But every show in the Man in the Arena series can be seen at welcometothearena.com. Talk business. Join me on LinkedIn by searching out Ed Berliner. The Man in the Arena is available on all major audio podcast platforms, including iTunes, iHeart, Google Podcast, Amazon Music, and Pandora. The Man in the Arena is a copyrighted production of Entourage Management, LLC and Entourage Media. It may not be used in any form without the expressed written permission of these entities and or their legal representatives.